The morning mist had barely lifted when the first child screamed. Old Mama Jalea was feeding her chickens when she turned, frowning toward the eastern path that cut through the banana groves. Her breath caught. She dropped her bowl, scattering feet as she backed away. Something pale and slow was drifting down the narrow dirt trail, floating, almost. No footsteps followed it. No figure pushed it. Just a billowing cloud of white, trailing dust behind it like a bride walking to the altar with no music. Children gathered first. Then women with pounding hearts. Then men with cutlasses and trembling hands. And as the morning light grew stronger, they saw it clearly. The wedding dress. Torn at the hem. Brown stains trailing from the bodice. Dust smeared across the veil like fingerprints from the underworld. But it moved. Moved steadily. Silently. As if worn by invisible skin and bones. Its sleeves swayed with a rhythm that didn't match the wind. Its lace shifted like something breathing underneath. No one dared approach it. Even the dogs refused to bark. Even the birds went quiet. By the time the dress reached the village square, a full crowd had gathered. Some crossed themselves. Some spat on the ground and whispered protection chants. Some just stared with wide eyes and tight throats. "That's her dress," someone finally said. "She was buried in it," another muttered, stepping back. "But where is she?" No one answered. A child began to cry. An elder began to pray. The dress collapsed at the foot of the shrine tree. It didn't fall like cloth. It folded, slow, deliberate, as though some ghost had knelt down and let go. And then, it was still. Utterly still. A long silence fell. Then came the whispers. "Is she back? Did the grave spit her out? Didn't they say the earth shook the night she was buried?" Someone whimpered, "They should have never touched her. Never dressed her like that. It wasn't her wedding." Old Mama Jalea shuffled forward, clutching a gnarled walking stick. Her eyes never left the heap of fabric. "I told them," she rasped. "You do not dress a girl in a sacred cloth meant for another. The ancestors choose their brides. You can't trick them." The chief's guards appeared then, spears gleaming in the sun, but even they hesitated before touching the dress. One of them bent down, reached out, fingers trembling. The veil twitched. He screamed and stumbled back. The crowd surged. Panic. Wails. Footsteps fading fast. And in the chaos, only Mama Jalea remained, staring down at the dress with eyes that remembered. "She's not done," she whispered. "And this is only the beginning." Somewhere far off, a drum beat once in the wind. Then again. Faint. Distant. As if calling something home. And just like that, the village began to remember the girl they had buried. The girl no one had truly mourned. The girl who had worn that dress against her will. The girl whose story was not yet finished. The first time the wedding dress was laid out in the open, it shimmered like morning dew. Its silk was ivory white, embroidered with tiny pearls said to be harvested from the mouth of a sacred river fish. The hem carried threads of gold that caught the sun in dancing streaks. Women from 5 villages had come to help stitch it together, each one humming an old marriage hymn as they worked. And though the entire village spoke of its beauty, everyone knew one thing without question. It was made for Adissa. Adissa, bold and sharp-tongued, with a face like a carved doll and laughter that turned heads. She was the only daughter of Mama Rema, the widow who had once been married to the village's wealthiest fisherman and now ruled her household like a queen. Adissa was meant to marry Prince Abadil, the soon-to-be ruler of the forest kingdom of Abono. Talks had begun a year earlier. Mama Rema had already begun calling herself Queen Mother in private. The dress was only the final touch. Nala, on the other hand, was almost invisible. She had no real family left. Her mother had died when she was 5, and her father, weak and grieving, had married Mama Rema a year later. 2 years after that, he drowned under strange circumstances while fishing in shallow water. Since then, Nala had lived like a shadow in her own home, sweeping before dawn, grinding maize till her fingers cracked, washing dishes with cold river stones, and sleeping beside the fire like a servant girl. She never complained. She never fought. She never raised her voice. But she saw everything. And in her silence, she learned things even the loudest women missed. She noticed how Adissa always applied palm oil behind her ears when she wanted something. How Mama Rema would hold her breath when she lied. How the village women's laughter always faltered when she walked by in her tattered wrapper, sensing her presence like a question they didn't want to answer. And then came the prince. He arrived on a horse as black as smoke, his eyes scanning the crowd of girls gathered to greet him. Mama Rema had trained Adissa for this moment. Her daughter danced, sang, offered carved fruit, and recited old proverbs. But Prince Abadil's gaze wandered. Past the crowd. Past the music. To the girl standing quietly by the calabash pots, her hands stained with millet, her eyes lowered. Nala. At first, everyone thought it was curiosity. Then politeness. But the prince returned the next day, and the next. Each time, he asked questions no one expected. Who wakes before dawn to sweep the village path? Who nursed the boy with the broken leg when no one else would? Who brought water to the widow's hut last dry season without being asked? Every answer led to Nala. 3 weeks later, the chief of messengers stood at the village square and read from the scroll, by decree of Prince Abadil, the royal bride shall be Nala, daughter of late fisherman Ao. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mama Rema clutched her dress like it might rip apart. Adissa stood frozen, eyes wide, fists clenched. The villagers were too shocked to speak. Nala said nothing. When she was summoned to the prince's hut that evening, she walked slowly, the dust clinging to her bare feet. The prince welcomed her with a soft smile. I know this is unexpected, he said, pouring her water. But I've watched you for months, Nala. The way you move. The way you care. You have the soul of a queen. She kept her eyes on the floor. I did not ask to be chosen, my lord. I know. But I choose you still. She whispered, they will hate me for it. He reached out, lifting her chin gently. Let them. A throne built on envy cannot shake the heart of a worthy woman. That night, she returned to her home in silence. The dress still hung above Adissa's bed, catching the candlelight like a living thing. Mama Rema and Adissa sat in silence. Then, slowly, Mama Rema smiled. Well, she said coolly. A daughter is a daughter. A bride is a bride. Adissa forced a laugh. And blood is still blood, isn't it, Mama? Yes, Mama Rema replied. Still blood. They called Nala into the room. Spoke sweetly. Offered her hot porridge and a warm blanket. It must be fate, Mama Rema said. A miracle, Adissa added. Nala nodded politely. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. She simply went to her corner and lay down, staring at the ceiling as shadows danced overhead. But later that night, when she closed her eyes, she could hear the sewing needles again. The women stitching in the courtyard. The dress that was never hers, being prepared for a future that wasn't meant for her. And she could feel it. Something shifting. Something wrong. The rage didn't come in screams or slaps. It came in silence. In the way her water suddenly tasted bitter. In the way her chores doubled. In the way Adissa's laughter sharpened when others were around. And in the way Mama Rema began whispering into gourds at night. Nala felt the air grow colder. The wedding was in 5 days. The drums had already been carved. The feast animals tied. The dress had been taken from Adissa's room and now hung in the front hut, waiting for its new bride. But not everything that waits is patient. And not every bride reaches the altar. The night before the wedding, the village air was thick with song and smoke. Fires burned along the path to the elder's compound, and the scent of roasted yams and peppered meat clung to the wind. Children ran barefoot through the dust, chasing fireflies. The elders drank from carved calabashes and sang songs that hadn't been heard in years. It was the kind of night the ancestors watched with pride, or vengeance. Inside the bride's chamber, Nala sat quietly on a mat of woven reeds. Her skin had been scrubbed with herbs. Her hair was twisted in long coils that fell down her back like black rivers. On her arms and legs were painted sacred markings, drawn with white chalk and red ash. She looked every bit a bride of royalty, glowing, regal, still. But her eyes never quite stopped flicking to the corner, where the wedding dress hung. It had been moved just hours ago from the front hut to hers. Draped carefully over a carved wooden frame, it stood like a spirit on its own, a thing too delicate to touch, too proud to bow. Nala stared at it with a strange heaviness in her chest. It was beautiful, yes. But there was something else. A pull. A pressure in the room that hadn't been there before. "Let's drink to calm your nerves," Odessa said, walking in with a small clay cup. She was smiling, her voice syrupy and warm, but her eyes carried that flicker, the one Nala had seen too many times to ignore. Nala hesitated. "I'm not nervous." "You must be," Odessa pressed, kneeling beside her. "Marrying a prince, wearing that dress, the whole village watching." She held out the cup again. Steam rose gently from the surface. "It will help you sleep," she said, brushing imaginary dust from Nala's cheek. Nala took it slowly. The rim was warm. The smell was sweet, too sweet. Honey, yes. But beneath it, something bitter. Something unfamiliar. Still, she drank. She was tired, after all. The day had been long, the ceremonies exhausting. Maybe sleep would help. Maybe the knots in her belly would loosen. Maybe, just maybe, it was kindness after all. But as the stars turned overhead and the night deepened, her limbs began to tingle. She turned on her mat, groggy. Her fingers felt numb. Her breathing slowed. The painted chalk on her arms seemed to melt into her skin. Her eyes fluttered. And then, darkness. No pain. No fear. Just sinking. By dawn, the drummers were already gathering near the palace gate. The ululations of the women began as they lit incense and sang her name. Nala. Nala, bride of Abadil, chosen of the ancestors. Mama Rema entered the chamber with the royal maids to prepare her. They pulled back the curtain. And screamed. Nala lay still, her face pale, her lips parted slightly. The wedding dress had fallen from its frame and now rested against her shoulder, as if trying to cling to her. "She's not breathing," one of the maids shrieked. The palace sent for the healer. But not the real one. Instead, Mama Rema summoned Oken the Bone Reader, an old man known for theatrics and paid illusions. He knelt beside Nala, placed his ear to her chest, then stood up with a grave expression. "She has been rejected," he declared. "The spirit of the dress has refused her." "What does that mean?" the crowd asked. "She must have sinned," he said, eyes darting. "The ancestors have closed the door." The silence that followed was broken only by Mama Rema's wails. She threw herself to the ground. "No! Not my daughter. Not our bride." Odessa tore her wrapper and wept openly. She wanted this so much. We warned her not to tempt fate. The prince arrived moments later, eyes wild. He rushed to the chamber, pushed past the guards, and collapsed beside Nala's body. He kissed her forehead. He whispered her name. "Nala," he begged. "Wake up. Please." But she didn't stir. Tradition demanded immediate burial for a rejected bride. Spirits left unattended could invite plague, misfortune, or worse. And so, before midday, Nala's body was wrapped, not in burial cloths, but in the wedding dress she never got to wear. The sacred garment was meant to guide her to the afterlife, or seal her forever beneath the earth. The village gathered at the edge of the forest. A narrow grave had been dug, shallow but lined with flowers and scented leaves. The mourners sang old funeral songs. Mama Rema wailed again. Odessa fainted twice. The prince stood motionless, like carved stone. As they lowered Nala into the ground, a gust of wind tore through the trees, lifting the edge of her veil. Some said her fingers twitched. Some said her lips moved. But no one dared say it aloud. The earth covered her quickly. The last spade of soil landed like a dull drumbeat. The priest placed a carved mask over the grave, a symbol of protection, or suppression. "She walks no more," the priest intoned. But the wind whispered through the trees like an argument. That night, the drums were silent. No feast. No dancing. The wedding that was promised became a burial no one would speak of again. And deep in the earth, the dress clung to its new bride. But the earth, they say, does not keep what is cursed. The village settled into mourning, or so it seemed. The prince vanished 3 days after the burial, taking only his horse and a single guard. He left no word. Some said he rode north toward the mountain shrines to pray. Others whispered he'd lost his senses and gone to speak with the dead. Whatever the truth, his absence hung over the village like smoke that refused to lift. But not everyone wore sorrow honestly. Inside the compound of Mama Rema, mourning took a strange shape. The first few nights, she sat by the fire with ash smeared across her arms, wailing so loudly even the dogs cowered. Adissa wept in her lap, whispering between sobs about how much she had loved her sister. But after the 5th night, the weeping stopped. Mama Rema changed her wrapper to one of bright yellow. The food improved. Palm wine flowed again. One afternoon, she called the village women together and roasted 2 whole goats. "We must honor Nala," she said sweetly, raising her calabash. "Let us not mourn with bitterness but celebrate the time we had with her." The women clapped politely, though some exchanged glances. The air around the compound seemed warmer than usual, and not in a good way. The kind of warmth that made the back of your neck itch. By the 2nd week, Adissa was seen wearing gold earrings again. She walked through the market with her chin high and her eyes scanning the horizon like someone expecting an announcement. It came on the 12th day. Mama Rema gathered the elders privately. "We cannot let sorrow consume the kingdom," she said solemnly. "Let us consider the prince's grief. Let us offer him a second chance, the rightful bride." Adissa stepped forward, head bowed, lips trembling. "I do not seek to replace her," she whispered, voice rehearsed. "Only to honor her, by continuing the union she could not complete." The elders nodded slowly. A second union after tragedy wasn't unheard of, but it was rare. Sacred traditions warned against mocking fate twice. Still, with the prince absent, and the royal council pressing for stability, the idea took root. Preparations began again. Quietly. But the village was no longer quiet. First, it was small things. Pieces of cloth from the mourning bundles went missing. Bangles from Adissa's drawer vanished. The necklace that had been laid over Nala's body reappeared, dangling from the well beside Mama Rema's hut. Then came the whispers from the children. They said a girl had been seen beneath the old wedding tree at dawn, brushing her hair with slow, ghostly strokes. Her back was always turned. She never answered when called. One boy swore she hummed, not a song, but a lullaby, one Nala used to sing when the wind howled at night. Mama Rema slapped him for saying it. But the rumors spread like spilled oil. And one night, just after the new wedding drums were delivered, the gravedigger came running into the village, barefoot and trembling. "The earth," he gasped. "Her grave." They followed him with lanterns and fear thick in their throats. The grave was disturbed. Not freshly dug, but cracked. Split. As if something had pushed from beneath, not above. The mask that had been placed over the soil was gone. The flowers that had once lined the pit now lay dry and scattered like bones. One woman fainted. Another began praying so loud it drowned out the wind. But Mama Rema said nothing. Just stared at the broken ground, her jaw clenched tight. That night, she burned more incense than usual. Her eyes darted at every shadow. She made Adissa sleep beside her. And far outside the compound, by the old wedding tree, something brushed its hair beneath the branches, patient and silent. The mourning in the village continued. But behind certain doors, there were no more tears. Only a quiet, growing fear. They said the second wedding would be modest, quiet, nothing like the first. After all, it was being held in the shadow of tragedy. No fanfare. No dancing in the square. Just a private feast to bind Adissa and Prince Abadil under the eyes of the ancestors, to bring peace back to the village and still the unsettling whispers that had begun creeping from hut to hut like vines in the night. Mama Rema kept the arrangements hushed. Only the elders, the palace guards, and the royal drummer were told. The cloth for Adissa's new dress was sewn in the dark, away from the gossiping tailors of the marketplace. The bride would wear something different now, a new dress for a new beginning, Mama Rema said. But the old one had not been forgotten. It had vanished, after all. After Nala's burial, the dress was meant to rest with her. Yet when the grave was found cracked, the cloth was gone. Some claimed it had decayed. Others whispered it had risen on its own. Either way, no one had seen it since. Until that morning. It was just before sunrise. A soft mist clung to the treetops. The villagers had not yet begun their daily routines when the dogs began barking wildly, not toward the huts, but toward the eastern path that cut through the forest. Then came the sound of something dragging. Not footsteps. Not hooves. Just a swishing, rhythmic movement across the dry leaves. At first, the watchman at the village gate thought it was a large animal. He squinted through the mist, spear trembling in his hand. But as the fog began to thin, he saw it. The wedding dress. It moved with purpose, each fold and ripple gliding across the earth as if carried by invisible limbs. The veil floated gently behind it. The gold-threaded hem caught the pale morning light like a flame crawling through dew. No wind moved it. No creature carried it. Yet still it walked. The watchman fell to his knees, his scream waking half the village. People rushed out, rubbing their eyes, holding their children back. The dress continued its slow procession down the path, trailing dirt and fallen leaves, its lace darkened at the edges. It did not sway like a cloth in wind. It stepped, as if possessed by muscle and bone no one could see. By the time it reached the gate, not a soul dared speak. The dress paused. It turned slightly, like someone surveying the crowd. Then, with a final flutter of its sleeves, it folded in on itself, slowly, deliberately, and collapsed at the village gate in a soft heap. Empty. Women shrieked. A baby began to cry. The chief's guards drew their spears but refused to approach. Even the priest stumbled backward, whispering prayers under his breath. Mama Rema appeared, wrapped in silk, her face pale as ashes. She stared at the pile of fabric in the dust, the same one her hands had once helped stitch, the same one she had laid over Nala's still body. Her mouth opened, then closed. Adissa emerged behind her, mouth agape. Her wedding beads clattered against her collarbones as she trembled. One elder, old Papa Matsi, stepped forward, leaning heavily on his carved staff. His eyes were milky, nearly blind, but his voice cut through the silence. She was not done with us, he said. And neither was the dress. Another elder asked hoarsely, is it cursed? Papa Matsi shook his head. No. It is just waiting. For what? Someone whispered. The old man didn't answer. He knelt slowly, his hand inches from the dress, then stopped. The fabric twitched. Just once. Like something inside had sighed. He stood again. Bury it. Deep. Not with salt or prayers. With silence. But silence had already broken. That day, the wedding was cancelled. The feast was never prepared. The drums remained untouched. Prince Abadil, who had returned quietly only 2 nights earlier, rode away again without a word. He left behind his ring, his title parchment, and a small wooden flute Nala once carved as a child. Mama Rema locked herself inside her hut for 2 days. Adissa refused to eat. She was heard crying in her sleep, muttering strange phrases in a voice that did not sound like her own. The dress remained at the gate for hours. No one moved it. The sun passed overhead. The shadows lengthened. And just as the last light began to fade, it was gone again. Some claimed it simply vanished. Others swore they saw it slither across the earth toward the burial grounds, folding itself into the forest like a snake returning to its den. The village slept poorly that night. Fires were kept burning longer. Doors were bolted. Parents tied charms around their children's wrists. And all through the night, a strange sound echoed through the trees, the faint rustle of fabric, moving with footsteps no one could see. And though no one dared say it aloud, they all knew the truth. The wedding dress had come back. But not for a ceremony. Not for joy. It had come for justice. When Prince Abadil returned the second time, it was not with royal trumpets or palace guards. He came cloaked in a plain traveler's wrap, dust clinging to his boots, his eyes darker than before. No one greeted him at the gate. No songs were sung. The village was still, as if holding its breath. He had heard the rumors on the road, even in distant markets, the dress walks. The girl sings beneath the wedding tree. The grave was broken. And he had heard the most disturbing one of all. They say if you hold the dress, you hear her heartbeat. He dismounted without a word and walked to the palace of elders. They sat waiting for him, avoiding his gaze. Even Papa Matsi, the oldest and boldest among them, kept his eyes low. I want the truth, the prince said. All of it. Mama Rema had refused to speak, he was told. She had fallen ill, or so she claimed. Adissa had locked herself in a room and covered her mirror with cloth. But the grave was still there. So the prince went alone. He walked the winding path toward the ancestral grove, where the chosen were buried with ceremony and silence. The grave was untouched since that night, or so it seemed. The red clay around it had dried, cracked with time. The carved mask placed over it was gone, and in its place lay a small offering bowl filled with river stones. He stood there for a long time. Then he called for shovels. The grave was deeper than expected. Sweat glistened on his brow as he pulled away the last layer of soil, his hands bloodied from clawing through roots and stone. At last, he reached it, the wooden coffin, carved with the royal bride's symbol. He pried it open. And stared. No body. Only rocks. Large, smooth river rocks packed neatly, wrapped in burial cloths. At the very center, pressed where a heart should be, lay a single white bead, one that had come from the dress's collar. The prince staggered back. His voice cracked in the silence. She was alive. And someone had known. He sat by the open grave until the sky bruised purple with dusk. Then he remembered the old lore, taught to princes long ago, that beneath the ancestral grounds ran a narrow tunnel, carved during the wars to rescue nobles in case of siege. It had long been sealed, buried under time and myth. But if someone knew, if someone opened it, Nala could have escaped. Or been let out. But by whom? He returned to the village with fire in his chest. He demanded Mama Rema appear before the elders. She arrived supported by two women, her skin paler than before, her mouth trembling. Still, she insisted she had known nothing. She was cold when we found her, she whispered. We did only what the ancestors demand. The prince turned to the elders. She buried a living woman and then tried to replace her. Is there no justice for this? Papa Matsi stood slowly. There is. But justice moves in shadows. And sometimes, it wears a dress. The prince said nothing, but in his eyes burned a promise. That night, the dress returned again. It appeared outside Mama Rema's compound, draped over the wooden stool where Nala once sat to grind maize. No wind moved it, but its sleeves fluttered gently, like breathing. The village watched from afar, no one daring to approach. By dawn, it was gone again. But the stool had been scorched black. A girl passing by claimed she'd heard it hum in the night. Others swore they saw footprints in the dirt, small, bare feet leading away from the stool toward the edge of the forest. And then the visions began. Adissa claimed she saw Nala in her dreams, standing at the foot of her bed, holding the dress. She woke up screaming, her hands covered in welts that faded by morning. Mama Rema began to speak to herself at night. Her servants reported hearing her beg for forgiveness through the walls. I didn't know. I thought she was dead. I didn't mean to. But guilt is a loud spirit. It does not sleep. The prince spent his days walking the village paths, asking questions, piecing together truths from silence and half-truths. At the wedding tree, he found a single strand of black hair tangled in the bark. He pocketed it without a word. He followed the stories to the edge of the burial grounds, where he found the entrance to the emergency tunnel, cracked open just enough for a body to squeeze through. Inside, he found claw marks. A smear of dried blood. A torn piece of the wedding dress caught on a rock. And something else. A footprint in the mud. Too small for his own. Bare. Fresh. She had been there. She was still nearby. But she hadn't returned for love, nor for revenge that could be spoken. She had returned for something older. Deeper. Justice. And the dress, it wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was part of the story, alive in its own right. Carrying memory. Carrying grief. Carrying wrath. Each time it reappeared, it came closer to the truth. Closer to the one who had wronged her. Closer to the night where everything would be answered. The prince sat beneath the wedding tree that evening, holding the strand of hair between his fingers, listening to the wind whisper through the branches. And for the first time in weeks, he spoke her name aloud. Nala. Something rustled behind him. But when he turned, nothing was there. Only the faint scent of jasmine. Only the chill of something ancient. Only the echo of a heartbeat. And far off, beyond the trees, the hem of a wedding dress dragged silently through the dirt. The drums began just after sunrise, loud, urgent, uneven. Not the steady, regal beat of celebration, but something more frantic, forced, like the rhythm of fear trying to sound like joy. Mama Rema had demanded the wedding take place that very morning. She said the village was cursed, the prince bewitched, the spirits angry. Only a proper union would still the unrest. And so, Adissa was dressed in haste, her hands shaking as the maids painted her skin with turmeric and tied golden beads around her wrists. Her smile cracked more than once. It's just nerves, Mama Rema whispered, adjusting her veil. Once you are crowned, all of this will be behind us. But something else moved behind them. The villagers gathered reluctantly, shoulders stiff, voices low. No one had forgotten the walking dress. No one ignored the whispers of the grave. But fear makes people foolish, and tradition makes them obedient. So they came, out of habit, out of duty, out of curiosity. Prince Abadil stood at the altar, his eyes distant, jaw tight. He said nothing when Adissa approached, her steps careful on the path lined with red petals. The drums quickened, then slowed, stumbling mid-beat. A wrong rhythm. The drummers glanced at each other, unsure why their hands felt suddenly cold. Halfway down the aisle, Adissa paused. The wind died. The leaves stopped rustling. Then came the silence. Heavy. Dense. Complete. Even the birds above fell quiet. And then, she appeared. Not from the path, not from the altar, but from the trees. Nala. Wrapped in leaves and soil, her bare feet silent on the earth, her hair loose and tangled like black vines. Her skin was streaked with ash. Her arms were painted with the same sacred markings from the night before her wedding, now faded, but glowing faintly, as if drawn by something not of this world. But it was her eyes that stopped every breath in the village. Black. Hollow, yet burning. As if the ancestors themselves had lit a fire inside her and given it permission to rise. Gasps scattered through the crowd. One woman dropped her basket. A child began to wail. The priest, standing beside the prince, took one look and dropped his staff. It clattered against the stone. Still, Nala walked forward. No one moved. Not Adissa. Not Mama Rema. Not the prince. The earth seemed to open before her steps. Then came the sound, soft at first, like cloth brushing against bark. The dress. It floated from behind the trees, drifting slowly toward her like smoke. Its torn hem kissed the ground. Its veil shimmered with something wet, dew or tears or blood. No one could say. It moved without hands. Without body. Until it reached her. And wrapped itself around her. First the sleeves, winding up her arms. Then the bodice, tightening over her chest. The veil rose and settled over her hair like a crown woven from memory and rage. In moments, she was clothed not just in silk and gold, but in story, in betrayal, in earth, in truth. Only then did she speak. Her voice was not loud. But it did not need to be. "You buried me," she said, eyes locked on Mama Rema. "Now I will bury the truth." Mama Rema stumbled back, her mouth open in horror. She was dead. She was cold. "No," Nala said. "I was silent." "You mistook silence for death." Adissa trembled, taking a step backward. "I didn't mean." But Nala raised her hand. "You meant to wear my name. You meant to walk over my bones. Now feel the weight of what you stole." Suddenly, the wind returned, wild, screaming through the trees. The petals along the path rose like a red storm. The ground beneath Adissa cracked. The stones trembled beneath everyone's feet. The prince stepped forward, eyes wide with sorrow. "Nala." She turned to him, and for a moment, her gaze softened. "I would have loved you," she whispered. "But love cannot bloom in poisoned soil." Then her eyes shifted back to the altar. A root broke through the earth, curling around the priest's fallen staff. Another wrapped around Mama Rema's ankle. She screamed, pulling free, only for a second root to snap upward and grip her wrist. The earth was remembering. The dress rippled. And then, as if on cue, Nala knelt and pressed her palm to the ground. The storm stopped. Silence fell again. But this time, it felt finished. She stood and turned to the villagers. "Let it be known, I did not rise for vengeance. I rose for truth." She looked at the prince one last time. "Rule wisely. Love cleanly. Forget me not." Then, she walked down the path, not toward the village, not toward the forest, but toward the burial grounds. The dress did not drag behind her. It flowed. Like a river returning to the sea. And when she reached the edge of the sacred grove, her figure shimmered, as though smoke were lifting from a fire too long buried. She stepped beyond the trees. And was gone. The villagers stood frozen. No one spoke. Not until Papa Matsi, shaking with age and awe, whispered, "A reckoning, not a bride." And the wedding drums cracked. One by one, without a hand touching them. The sacred tree had not witnessed a judgment in decades. Its wide, ancient trunk stood in the center of the village like a god watching men forget their promises. Its roots cracked the earth beneath it, rising like ribs from a buried beast. Here, generations ago, disputes had been settled, not by sword or fire, but by truth, spilled and swallowed beneath its branches. Now, it was alive again with watchers. The villagers came in silence, children clutching their mothers, men gripping charms, women holding their breath. In the center stood Nala. Still wrapped in the wedding dress. But it no longer looked like cloth. It moved with her breath. It pulsed with memory. Every time she shifted, it shimmered, and flashes leapt from its folds like lightning in water, her pale face buried in the dark coffin, the stepsisters shaking hands stirring herbs into the tea. Mama Rema placing a mirror under her nose and nodding to the fake healer, the priest looking away as the dirt covered her lips. Every eye in the village watched. No one blinked. The prince stood nearby, tense and silent. The elders formed a half-circle before the tree, their staffs dug into the ground, their expressions carved from stone. Then Papa Matsi spoke. The ancestors have been disturbed. The bride buried in silence now returns with the voice of the earth. We must answer. Nala raised her head. Her eyes glowed with quiet fire. I did not come to haunt, she said. Her voice was soft, but the ground shivered beneath her bare feet. I came to remember what they tried to bury. She looked at Adissa first. Adissa fell to her knees. Her lip bled where she had bitten it to stay calm. I didn't mean for you to die, she cried. It was Mama. She made me bring the tea. She said it would make you sleep. Just sleep. A gust of wind circled them. The dress lifted slightly, revealing a burst of vision, Adissa watching through the curtain as Nala drank, silent tears streaking her cheeks. She had been afraid. But she had obeyed. The elders murmured. One of them stepped forward. You may have obeyed, the old woman said to Adissa. But fear does not clean the blood from your hands. Adissa wept. I was jealous. I thought I deserved the prince. But she never even wanted the wedding. I just wanted to matter. And what did you do when she stopped breathing? Another elder asked. I ran, she whispered. The elders turned to Mama Rema. She did not kneel. She did not cry. She stood straight, her jaw tight, her eyes sharp. She was already weak. She was not meant to be queen. The dress rejected her, even the spirits saw it. The ground beneath her feet rumbled. A crack split through the dirt and coiled like a snake toward her toes. Still, she didn't flinch. If I buried her, it was mercy. If she rose, it was madness. She was unfit for a throne built on tradition. Nala stepped forward, the dress wrapping tighter around her like armor. You used tradition as a knife, she said. You carved silence into my mouth and called it duty. But the ancestors watched. Another tremor rippled across the earth. The tree groaned above them. Birds fled its branches. Justice must be fed, Papa Matsi said gravely. One of you must return to the ground. One of you must carry the weight of the dress. The cloth knows betrayal. The roots remember the truth. Adissa shrieked. Please. Not me. I confessed. I'm sorry. Mama Rema remained still. You'd bury a mother? Nala's gaze pierced her. You were never mine. The dress unfurled. It hovered in the air, sleeves spread like wings, lace dancing with light and shadow. The village gasped as it hovered between the two women, then tilted slowly toward Mama Rema. No, she rasped, stepping back. No. The roots at her feet cracked wider. One coiled around her ankle. Stop, she cried, reaching out. The dress flew at her, wrapping itself around her body with a force that spun her off her feet and slammed her to the ground. She screamed, but the cloth swallowed the sound. Her limbs stiffened. Her eyes rolled back. Then the earth opened. Slow. Inevitable. Like a mouth taking back what had never belonged above. The roots folded inward. The soil rose like waves. The villagers cried out, stepping back as the ground consumed her, not in a rush, but with slow hunger. The last thing seen was her hand, shaking inside the sleeve of the sacred dress. Before it, too, was pulled under. Then silence. The earth closed. No priest stepped forward. No prayers were sung. But the tree let out a long sigh, its leaves rustling like distant applause. Papa Matsi turned to Nala. Your truth is heard. She nodded once, her shoulders sagging as if some great weight had been lifted. The dress remained gone, buried now with its final bearer. Adissa was taken into the elder's watch, not to be punished, but to serve, to carry water, grind millet, and tend to the graves until her heart healed. The prince did not try to claim Nala again. Instead, he bowed before her in the square and said simply, You are the queen of your own name. And that was enough. For the girl once buried had become more than bride, more than queen. She was justice given breath. And from that day, the tree never slept. In a secret hut beyond the village, past the tall grasses where the wind speaks and whistles, past the stream where offerings drift like forgotten promises, they say a girl sits quietly. She doesn't speak. She doesn't age. She brushes a wedding dress. Slowly. Lovingly. Like a memory that won't let go. Some say it's Nala. Some say it's her spirit, too stubborn to rest, too loyal to leave. Others say she walked into the earth that day and came out on the other side, not buried, but reborn. A bride not for any man, but for justice itself. The prince never searched for her again. He ruled with kindness, with silence, with sorrow behind his eyes. He never married. His flute, carved by Nala's hand, was found once in the center of the village, placed gently beneath the judgment tree. No one moved it. But the dress stayed. They did not bury it again. They did not burn it. They tried to throw it into the river once, but the water spat it out, laying it neatly on the shore as if to say, "She is not finished." So it was hung, not in a home, not in a shrine, but on a low branch of the judgment tree, where the leaves turned darkest and the birds no longer nested. During the day, it is still. But at night, it moves. Not with wind. Not with breath. But with memory. Children say they've seen it dance, not twirl, but sway, as if held by hands unseen. A widow swore she saw it pressed gently against the bark, as if listening. A hunter once claimed he saw it fold itself into a woman's shape and vanish into the shadows. On certain nights, when the moon is lowest and the air is thick, the village dogs howl without reason. Doors creak. Mothers clutch their daughters tighter. And the elders whisper, "Never touch a dress that walks alone." They say the dress is not cursed, only watchful. It remembers who we are. What we do. Who we bury, and why. And when it moves, it is not to haunt. It is to choose. Some say the girl in the hut, if she is real, is waiting to pass it on. That the dress is not just a thing of silk and thread, but a legacy woven from silence, pain, and truth. A shroud for the forgotten. A crown for the wronged. A voice for the buried. So when children play near the tree, their mothers shout from afar. Not too close. And if a girl ever sees a dress where no dress should be, lying on a path, folded on a rock, floating by the stream, she is told to bow her head, step away slowly, and whisper, "I see you. I hear you. I remember." For the bride who rose from the grave walks no more. But the dress still waits.